Hello chess fans. In this video we're exploring the legendary Paul Morphy's incredible mastery of the Evans Gambit. Get ready to witness 5 mind-blowing games where Morphy's genius shines through the staring opening. Sit back and relax as we embark on a journey into the past to unlock the secrets of the Evans Gambit. In this fascinating game from 1849, Paul Morphy faces off against his father, Alonzo Morphy, in a battle of wits. I know growing up, I always wanted to beat my dad at chess, and Paul Morphy makes this feat look easy. Morphy starts with e4, and after e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop c4, we enter the Italian game. As black plays bishop c5, white unleashes the Evans Gambit with b4, sacrificing a pawn to weaken black's control of the center. Alonzo accepts the gambit. Morphy continues with c3, and after bishop c5, he advances with d4. Black captures the pawn, and white recaptures, creating a strong and unopposed pawn center. Black's bishop retreats to b6, and white castles. Black then moves his knight to a5, attacking the bishop, so Morphy saves it. Now black challenges the center with d5, but this allows white to open the e-file, creating a direct route to black's king. After queen takes d5, Morphy employs a clever bishop maneuver with bishop a3 eyeing the vulnerable e7 square. Black develops his bishop to e6, and white plays knight c3 attacking the queen. Black moves the queen back to d7, and white charges forward with d5, forcing the bishop to capture. Why is the bishop forced to capture? Well, let's say it goes to g4. Then white would play rook e1 check, and remember that powerful bishop on a3. Black's king would be forced to d8, and then queen c2 getting out of the pin. And this prepares knight e5, which would hit just about everything. If black takes the bishop, then bishop f5 is one epic queen trap. In the game, black took the pawn. Morphy then captures with knight takes d5, and after queen takes d5, he unveils his first tactical blow, bishop b5 check. Black's only move is queen takes b5, but now Morphy plays rook e1 check, forcing the knight to block. Morphy didn't want to just beat his dad, he wanted to crush him. So instead of taking the knight, he seizes the opportunity to gain even more activity with rook b1 attacking the queen. Black's position looks miserable as he moves the queen to a6, and now Morphy unleashes a devastating combination starting with rook takes e7 check. Black's king is forced to move to f8, and Morphy follows up with queen d5, threatening checkmate on f7. Black tries to counter by playing queen c4, but Morphy captures on f7 with his rook. Either way the king goes would be mate, but in the game, Alonzo played king g8, and Morphy delivers the final blow. Rook f8, checkmate. In this next game, Paul Morphy plays blindfolded against German-American master John William Schulten, and shows that his tactical genius shines even in the dark. The game starts as expected with the Italian game, and Morphy unleashes the Evans Gambit with b4. Schulten takes the bait and captures the pawn. Now white continues with c3, seeking to expand in the center. Black moves the bishop back to c5, and this time Morphy castles before grabbing the center with d4 on the next move. Some exchanges follow, then we once again see the familiar and powerful central pawn duo. Black's bishop retreats to b6, and white boldly pushes forward with d5, kicking the knight to e7. Morphy isn't done just yet. He plays e5, cramping black's position and trying to open more lines for attack. Black tries to find some counterplay with bishop g4, but Morphy remains unfazed. He calmly plays h3, inviting black to capture the bishop on f3, and then recaptures with queen takes f3. Black's idea in capturing the knight was removing the defense of the d4 square so that his bishop could land there, with a nice little double attack. White saves his rook by developing his knight, and black goes up a second pawn. But Morphy's relentless pressure continues. He plays bishop b5 check, forcing the black king to move to f8. White's pieces are swarming black's position, and with bishop b2, he activates his last minor piece. Black plays c6, and white responds with bishop d3, rerouting the bishop to the king side. We see knight c6, and the tension is building as Morphy brings more pieces into the attack with rook a to e1. Now black sees the opportunity to win a third pawn by capturing the knight on c3, removing the defense of d5. Then white retreats his bishop all the way back. Although black is up 3 pawns, the position is wide open and it's ideal for white's bishop pair. And black's king has seen better days. Black plays f6, blunting the bishop's diagonal. And Morphy plays rook e6, initiating a plan to bring his last piece into the attack, namely by doubling his rooks on the e-file. At this point, black's position looks frightening, but it's survivable if and only if he is able to see white's threat. But he didn't, and I don't blame him because it's a brilliant tactical combination and only someone as ingenious as Paul Morphy could spot it. Anyway, in the game, black plays b5 looking to push his pawn majority, and white strikes with rook takes e7. Black recaptures with his knight, and did you see the next move coming? Because I know I didn't. Bishop takes f6. If black captures, then queen f6, and either way the king goes, would lead to devastating consequences. If it goes the other way, then rook takes e7. In the game, black saves his knight, but is too little too late. Bishop e7 is double check. If the king goes to e8, then we'd have a cute little checkmate with a nice queen sacrifice. So in the game, black moved his king to g8, and after bishop f5, Schulten resigned. If black doesn't sacrifice his queen for the bishop, then bishop e6 is checkmate. In this third game, our protagonist Paul Morphy puts on a tactical masterclass against Frederick Lewis in London 1858. For the first time in this video, we see a refusal of the gambit, where Lewis plays bishop b6. At the time, declining a gambit was considered ungentlemanly, so let's see how Morphy reacted to this unexpected breach of etiquette. He starts off by castling. Black plays queen e7, which is an unusual move, but I'm guessing the idea is to defend the e-pawn so that he can capture the b-pawn with his knight. Anyway, white pushes a4, threatening to trap black's dark-squared bishop. Black counters with knight takes b4, but white's relentless attack continues, with a5 driving the bishop to c5. Now Morphy is able to expand in the center with tempo, and look who's back. None other than our favorite central pawn duo. After bishop b4, white plays knight e5, which is not objectively the best move, but the idea is to exchange black's developed knight and lure the queen to d5, where it's vulnerable to attack. Morphy plays queen b3, which is a neat trick. Black could take the rook on a1, but may find himself in trouble after bishop takes f7. If the king were to go to d8, then queen takes b4 wins a piece, threatens checkmate, and threatens to trap the black queen. King e7 is also pretty bad because it would lose a queen. And king f8 would lead to a trapped queen as well, as soon as you move the bishop. In the game, black played queen e7 to defend f7, and Morphy continued bringing his pieces out with bishop b2 and soon knight c3. Black captured the knight, allowing white to line up a battery of queen and bishop towards the g7 square. Black decides to castle, getting his king off the same file as his queen. This means white has to defend his e-pawn because there's no longer any tactics to pin the queen to the king. Then black plays knight e8, seemingly trying to build a fortress, and then f4 aims to expand on the king side. Black responds with queen c5 check, forcing white's king to the corner. The game continues with d6 and f5 as Morphy carries on his kingside pawn storm. Black plays yo-yo with his knight, bringing it back to f6. Then white's rook joins the assault with the idea of swinging over to the g-file. Black attempts to trade queens, but white persists with queen d2, keeping the tension. Black retreats to queen e7, and white's rook finally reaches its destination with rook g3. Black plays knight h5, attempting to displace the rook, but Morphy has a nasty surprise in store. He sacrifices the exchange with f6. Black takes the rook with check, and is then in a predicament regarding his king situation. If he doesn't take the pawn, then white could soon swing his queen over and checkmate would be hard to stop. So in the game, he does take the pawn. Morphy's queen charges the king side with queen h6, threatening bishop f6. Black tries queen d7 with the idea of defending mate with queen g4, but Morphy's attack is relentless. He plays queen takes f6 instead. Lewis makes a desperate attempt to save face, but he could only defend one checkmate, not both. In this game, Paul Morphy takes on Ford in a simultaneous exhibition held in New Orleans in 1858. Morphy kicks off the game with e4, and we once again enter familiar territory with the Evans Gambit. Unlike the last opponent, Ford accepts the gambit. White proceeds with c3 and black retreats his bishop to a5. The main move here is d4, but Morphy opts for castling. Black develops his knight somewhat passively to e7 instead of f6. And at the first sight of weakness, Morphy jumps his knight to g5, setting his sights on the vulnerable f7 square. Now keep in mind that if black castles, then white would go queen h5 with the double attack, and black would be wishing his knight were on f6 to defend the h7 square. Instead, black counters with d5, hoping to keep things under control. White captures the pawn, and black recaptures with the knight. Morphy now uncorks a stunning move. Knight takes f7, sacrificing his knight to expose the black king. Forward takes the bait and captures. Morphy wastes no time and puts more pressure on black with queen f3 check, luring the king to move to e6 to defend the knight, and is very fried liver-esque. And by the way, it may have been better for black to count their losses and let go of their knight. Anyway, Morphy then develops his dark squared bishop with bishop a3, creating a box around the black king. Black opts to retreat his bishop to b6, then rook e1 lines up the rook with the king and prepares d4. Now black's position is shambolic, but they somehow find the only move that doesn't lose on the spot, knight a5. This is because the bishop is attacked, and its capture would also protect the e5 pawn in the case of d4. And if the bishop were to leave this diagonal, then black has some more freedom to reorganize his pieces. However, Morphy goes ballistic with rook takes e5 check, sacrificing a rook to open up lines against black's king. Black must recapture, as king d7 would lead to checkmate on the spot. And white has the follow-up of d4 check, driving the king back to e6. Now Morphy has to be patient. He is down a good chunk of material, and if he gets too check happy, then black could consolidate his position. For example, with black's king exposed, white prepares a ferocious attack beginning with g4. The only move for black in this case is c5, cutting off white's dark squared bishop and creating an escape route for the king. But black plays g6 instead to stop queen f5. Only now does white gain more ground with queen e4 check, and we notice that with the pawn on g6, black's king has less freedom. For example, if it went to f6, then white now has mate in 4, since the black king can't escape. There we go. That's mate in 4. So in the game, the king is forced to f7. Morphy plays bishop takes d5 check, regaining some material. Black's king tries to hide on g7. White follows with bishop e7, attacking the queen, and black responds with rook e8, pinning the bishop to the queen. Now there's a checkmate in 5 here, if you want to pause and try your luck. Morphy starts with queen e5 check. With the black king on the run, white chases it with g5 check. After king h5, black's king is in a precarious position, and white exploits it with bishop f3 check, forcing black's bishop to block. White then plays queen g3, threatening to take the bishop with checkmate. Forward tries to defend with queen d7, but there was another threat. Morphy lands the final blow, queen h3 checkmate, taking advantage of the pin. Our final game is from an 1859 simultaneous exhibition in New York. Paul Morphy faces off against Jefferson, and this one has a spectacular ending. It starts as usual, and Jefferson accepts the gambit. Morphy proceeds with c3, black plays bishop c5, and white castles. The game continues with white thrusting forward in the center with d4, and black retreats his bishop to b6. Morphy captures the pawn on e5, opening up the center. Black recaptures with his pawn. White then plays queen b3, putting pressure on the f7 square. Black defends with queen f6. Now white could play bishop g5 here, developing with tempo, but first he plays bishop b5, pinning the knight to the king. And now bishop g5 would be stronger because it could win the e5 pawn. Black responds with bishop e6, developing his bishop with tempo. Morphy piles up on the pinned knight with queen a4, and black plays knight g to e7 to add a defender. Now white strikes with bishop g5. Black's response, queen g6, is met by capturing the knight, forcing black to recapture with the king. Morphy then captures the other knight, creating a doubled pawn structure, and proceeds to win the pawn back while attacking the queen. Black moves his queen back to f6. White delivers a check with knight takes c6. And here's a question for you. Would you play king to e8 as black? Because it's the only move. Surprisingly, there really aren't any good discovered checks, and other than being a pawn down, black is okay. Instead, like any reasonable person, black plays king f8. Morphy follows up with e5, attacking the queen. Black plays queen g5, and white plays h4, deflecting the queen away from the defense of e7. Morphy then plays queen a3 check, forcing the king to g8, because had it gone to e8, queen to e7 would be mate. He then delivers another check with knight e7. After king f8, he then follows up with knight g6, double check, driving the king back to g8. And I bet you know what comes next. Queen f8 check. Jefferson's rook is forced to capture, and finally Morphy ends the game with a beautiful smothered checkmate. That wraps up our analysis of these 5 phenomenal Paul Morphy games featuring the Evans Gambit. I hope you found this journey through chess history both entertaining and instructive. Don't forget to hit that like button, share the video with your fellow chess enthusiasts, and subscribe for more top-notch chess content.